What began with a love letter, a simple statement, and a hashtag has become one of the most important movements of our time. Black Lives Matter is unlike many modern social movements that seems to fizzle after their 15-minute spotlight on the nightly news. It has endured because it has taken a modern approach to leadership that plagues many initiatives. It addresses this issue through the decentralization structure, with the focus on the common vision, not the leaders. Black Lives movements also aim at holding individuals and groups once deemed untouchable accountable for their actions or lack of actions. Beginning in 2013, the Black Lives Movement started and as a social media platform, moved to the streets as retaliation against police brutality, racial inequalities, profiling, and the need for justice. Since then, leadership has created leverage, the awareness of cultural competence, and the vision has grown to include broader groups that have been marginalized because of race, gender, and sexual orientation. This step has allowed the movement to expand and flourish.
How the movement started. In 2012, the killing of Trayvon Martin sparked the existence of the Black Lives Matter movement. Martin was an African-American teen killed by a neighborhood watch volunteer in Sanford, Florida. The movement became nationally known during the protests in Ferguson, Missouri, after an 18-year-old black man named Michael Brown was shot and killed by a white police officer. This was the tipping point for Americans when they finally opened their eyes to police brutality and started to notice more and more instances like this. The organization was founded by Patrisse Khan-Cullors, Alicia Garza, and Opal Tometi, who have been on the front lines of protests around the nation since the beginning, fighting against the sustained and increasingly visible violence against black communities. Garza posted on her Facebook, "I continue to be surprised at how little Black Lives Matter, and I will continue that. Stop giving up on black life." And that is how the phrase came to be the title of this movement. Soon after the Ferguson protests, people were eager to help end state-sanctioned violence against black people. And Black Lives Matter stemmed from just 18 different cities into the global network infrastructure it is today, which is adaptive and decentralized with a common goal to continue organizing and building black power by supporting the development of new black leaders and also creating a network where black people can feel empowered. Interdisciplinary leadership is important among our co-founders because Black Lives Matter is a political and ideological intervention as affirmation to not only black communities, but humanity overall, as well as our society and resilience against oppression. The movement deals with different types of oppression such as racial profiling, ethnic violence, as well as discrimination in the workplace. And different communities and cultures, and even other leaders around the U.S., sometimes don't see blatant injustice as unjust because injustice has endured for so long in this country. Some people, including government leaders and even educators, feel that injustice is natural, inevitable, and unalterable. So, it's best the leaders of Black Lives Matter spread their inspiration across those different areas and to different people, and do that successfully through situational leadership, which is effective among changing environments, followers, and their communities. The history and concepts of Western leadership are continuously changing and adapting with the times. Organizers of Black Lives Matter work with everyday people and understand significant gaps in movement spaces and leadership. Black liberation movements in this country have created room, opportunity, and leadership mostly for black heterosexual cisgender men, leaving women, queer, and transgender people and others out. As a network, Black Lives Matter recognizes the need to center the leadership of all people to maximize their movement muscle and to intentionally avoid replicating harmful practices that excluded so many in past liberation movements.
Once again, the co-founders, or rather the architects of the Black Lives Matter movement consist of 3 black women: Patrisse Khan-Cullors, also known as a strategic advisor, Alicia Garza, and Opal Tometi. These three women knew there was a need for change after the shooting of Trayvon Martin and took charge of leading and organizing masses of people to spread the word that Black lives do matter. Of course, there are not only 3 Black women that ran the Black Lives Matter movement, but there are also members of their team that are recognized on their official website. These members include 6 Black women and 1 Black male that is from Canada. However, one could say that there are even lesser known voices in the movement. Those who tweet out hashtag BLM or hashtag Black Lives Matter is a voice in the movement, and those individuals that protest for the rights of Black lives are also voices for the movement. The number of individuals involved in this movement are very high. All in all, everyone a part of the Black Lives Matter movement had the same perspectives on how to lead the world into realizing that Black lives do matter. Some parts of their perspectives include creating a world free of anti-Blackness, fighting for our collective freedom, and practice justice, liberation, and peace in our engagements with one another. Collectively, the Black Lives Matter movement individuals believe in these statements. In an article by Dixon, she states that Black Lives Matter movement describe their work as a movement and not a moment. You might think, well, yes, I know that. But this means that this organization is seeking out change that will last forever, not just a few days or weeks or years, but a lifetime. This organization truly believes in delivering powerful messages that will last for a lifetime. We can see clear connections between what the Black Lives Matter movement does to achieve their goals and concepts that we have learned in this course. One commonality that is shown is the various channels of communication that the Black Lives Matter movement uses to get the attention of others. Their most used platform of communication comes from the use of social media. In an article by Jones and other authors, they state that BLM founders at first mobilized their concerns through social media by using hashtag Black Lives Matter. Narratives that demanded justice, acknowledgement, and accountability for the modern-day lynching, killing of Black lives by law enforcement officers. The use of social media allows group architects to reach vast amount of people in a short amount of time. Communication is also talked about in Schreiber and Schreiber, Chapter 6. They discuss communication, specifically how mass communication has the potential to become more relevant in today's society because of apps like Twitter and Facebook. In Chapter 10 of Practicing Leadership, Schreiber and Schreiber go on to state that virtual leadership is on the rise as well, and one must know how to manage and identify the needs of their followers in order to be successful, which the Black Lives Matter movement has done thus far. By using social media as a channel of communication, the BLM movement inherently draws in a youthful crowd. We believe that one aspect of the movement that the younger crowd appreciates is that the BLM movement participates in authentic communication. As stated in the Carlson article, which we read in the module under Power, Privilege, and Oppression, authentic communication is the ability to openly think and speak for yourself without the fear of judgment. With the Black Lives Matter movement being not as widely accepted, they have to take a risk and speak up for what they believe in, which they do on a daily basis. The last parallel between the Black Lives Matter movement and the concepts learned in this course is that the BLM movement strives towards ethical leadership and calls out hypocritical leadership. Hypocritical leadership is when a person of power acts in an unethical manner. Members of the BLM movement try to protest those who act unethically and look to knock those unethical leaders out of power, like the policemen that shoot unarmed Black men because of the stigma that they hold. In these ways, the Black Lives Matter movement perspectives on leadership connect with our course's content.
The Black Lives Matter movement is important because it fights to end violence and systematic oppression towards Black people. According to Layla McLeod, PhD candidate at the University of Iowa, oppression is a system that maintains advantage and disadvantage based on social group membership, intentionally and unintentionally on individual, institutional, and cultural levels. Privilege means unearned access to resources or social power only readily available to some people as a result of their advantaged social group membership. According to Dr. Peggy McIntosh, Senior Associate Research of Wesley Centers for Women, in her essay, White Privilege, Unpacking an Invisible Knapsack, white privilege is like an invisible weightless knapsack of special provisions, maps, passports, codebooks, visas, clothes, tools, and blank checks. She also says that in order to redesign social systems, we need to first acknowledge their colossal unseen dimensions. In the end, in order to end violence, systematic oppression, and to save more Black lives, white people must be made aware of their white privilege and what it means for other people without it. Black Lives Matter spreads awareness and gives a voice to Black lives who would otherwise be ignored. Ultimately, Black Lives Matter fights the inequality of power, privilege, and oppression. Some people might ask, why should the Black Lives Matter movement matter to people who are not Black? The answer is that oppression hurts everyone. Black Lives Matter is not a Black person issue, it's a human rights issue. According to Daryl G. Smith, a professor of education and psychology at Claremont Graduate University, oppression is harmful to upholding a healthy democracy. In Smith's book, Diversity's Promise for Higher Education, Making It Work, he says access to power, government, voting, resources, and decision-making remains a major factor in conflicts around the world. He also explains that in the United States, poverty and race are impossible to pull apart. This means that systematic barriers to access, education, and power, people of color are held down, resulting in high poverty levels. High poverty is bad news for everyone, regardless of race or class. According to Schreiberg and Schreiberg, leadership is ethical. They describe that part of being an ethical leader is being a moral person. Part of being viewed as a moral person is making decisions in a particular way. Decisions that are based on values, fairness, concern for society, and other ethical rules. Black Lives Matter has concern for an entire society, as we've just discussed that oppression is bad for everyone, not just those oppressed. And also, supporting others to overcome oppression and to end oppression systematically is ethical for them as well.
To answer the question of how people got involved with the Black Lives Matter movement, we see involvement mainly through protests and people having a social media presence. Besides the hashtag of Black Lives Matter, there is also BLM for short. The hashtag had a number of meanings and was in response to numerous events that occurred. The hashtag was a symbol of solidarity or approval of the movement, used as a stand against police violence, a tactic to gain momentum from the movement, in response to the events in Ferguson, and it was used as counter-movement sentiments. The reasons why the movement spread was due to the fact that people were disgusted with the violence, injustice, and intolerance towards people in the Black community. There were protests, and so people joined in. These protests led to solidarity actions around the world. Some ways people got and still can get involved is by joining a chapter, making a donation, making a purchase, and finding resources and actions. Some of these resources that are found on the Black Lives Matter website is toolkits. There are 4 available toolkits, which include Healing Action, Chapter Conflict Resolution, hashtag Talk About Trayvon, which is for white people, hashtag Trayvon Me Enseño, which is a toolkit which in Spanish, Trayvon Taught Me for Black and non-Black POC organizers, Handling Justice, and the Black Lives Matter 4-year anniversary report.
In a TED Talk titled An Interview with the Co-Founders of Black Lives Matter, the 3 co-founders took part in describing what they thought a leader was and what they should do. This has helped them shape as leaders and make them want to do better in other people's lives. The first one to speak on this was Patrisse Cullors. She stated that this movement is not just for individual selves but for everyone. She believes that anyone can be a leader if they show up and take interest in Black lives. The best way she thinks that you can do this is by standing up for those who are different and or being put down. We think that Patrisse makes a good point. If others are more culturally competent, then they may have more sympathy for the ones going through a hard time. The next person to speak was Opal Tometi. She states that different people possess different strengths, and in order for the team to flourish, there needs to be a different perspective and contribution. She also believes that being a leader is deciding when to step back and when to step in. We agree with her 2 statements, and we think that that's what leadership is all about. It is giving others the opportunity to be able to express their thoughts on projects or issues and help feel included. Sometimes to be able to do this, as leaders, we need to take a step back and let others lead. The last speaker was Alicia Garza. We found her words intriguing. She stated, "Leaders need support too. It is easy to be a leader when everyone likes you, but it is hard when you're being scrutinized for it." We found this intriguing because it was a different perspective that we had not yet thought about. We never thought about being a leader and how it might be hard to create conflict in one's life. We find this powerful that the three women are able to rise up and be vocal even when they are being scrutinized. These women take the words that they speak and translate it into their work. They are leaders every day, and they are informing others and trying to get them involved in different programs or fundraisers, as well as stepping back and letting others take the lead over smaller programs they create. These three women are very powerful in our minds and are using alternative ways of leadership to be able to spread the word. How has the Black Lives Matter movement been able to have a lasting impact? My generation is different. I grew up at the advent of social media where information is available in real time and is often provided in crude, unedited format. Social media is a game changer. It allows for many points of the story to be told without an editorial lens that is often filtered by those of dominance. As a grassroots effort that caught fire almost as quickly as it was ignited, the co-founders of the movement needed to determine how to fan the fire and make sure it wouldn't become extinguished. Traditional leadership commands and control methods were casted aside, and the movement took on a decentralized approach, relying solely on local rather than centralized national leadership. Organization is often spontaneous and not directed by a person or a named core group. Black Lives Matter has been criticized for the lack of direction or strategy, but Patrisse Cullors, co-founder of the Black Lives Matter movement, stated that the strategy is clear. The movement is working to ensure that people live with full dignity of their human rights. We are not leaderless, we're leaderful, she said. We're trying to change the world by developing a new vision for what this generation of Black leaders can look like. It's my generation that has taken social media and used it to unite people across the globe in an instant. The instantaneous nature allows for a new leadership approach that is fast and has further-reaching potential. Social media has allowed the Black Lives Matter movement to start more than 50 organizations across the country and around the world in just a few short years. A decentralized approach allows for thousands of Black people from across the world to come together and be fueled by the energy of a common vision and agenda. In the TED Talk, the co-founders also stated that race operates on a scale from black to white. The closer you are to white on the spectrum, the more privileges you have. The closer to black, the greater the hardships you face. Following up on what was stated earlier in power, privilege, and oppression, if one becomes more culturally competent, then it will raise cultural awareness. This cultural awareness will go towards the gifts or lack thereof that an individual is given as part of their invisible knapsack. This is why we believe that the quote is related to cultural competence scale. As a leader, if you are culturally competent, then ultimately you will have more understanding and be aware of others' cultural discrepancies. We found this to be a strong connection to the movement of Black Lives Matter because the main purpose of the program is to reach out to others and help them understand why Black Lives Matter and what they can do as individuals to help. While disproving the racist system isn't enough to change, recognition and acknowledgement are the final steps towards systemic change. If we could all become a little more culturally competent, then we could have a big impact on the world. The Black Lives Matter movement founders believe to make change, it can't come from one person, but it needs to come from the ground up. It may take one person to have a vision, but it takes an entire community to come together to implement that vision. As one person, you might stand alone, but as a community, you have a voice. This approach creates an effervescence of sorts where its bubbling up from the ground up swell is so great that it's hard to ignore. An example of the effervescence can be shown through the actions of a group of college students. shortly after September 12, 2014, and the police shooting of Michael Brown, an unarmed teenager in Ferguson, Missouri. The outrage spread to Mizzou, the flagship university in Missouri. There, chaos ensued, including a high-profile hunger strike, MU football team boycott, and other nonviolent protests. By early November, the president of the university was forced to resign over the mishandling of racial incidents on campus. It wasn't what the president did during the time that led to his resignation. It was about what he didn't do. His unresponsiveness and apathy ultimately led to his demise. The impact has been lasting. On July 9, 2017, the New York Times reported that the freshman enrollment in just 2 years was down 35%. This has forced the closure of 7 dorms, reduced nearly 500 positions, and required a budget reduction of $101 million. The outcry from the advocates and supporters within the Black Lives Matter community was heard loud and clear. Solidarity can make a difference and does have the ability to hold individuals that are in a position to protect people accountable. In week 5, we discussed the concepts of leadership identity, and we did an activity that told us who we were. During this activity, we had to identify our core identities, which are the identities on the inside, such as compassionate, empathetic, or hard worker. After that, we were to identify our social identities, which are on the outside, like Caucasian, Catholic, and heterosexual. This made me realize that in the world today, most people define us as individuals from our social identities. But we feel like if we were to ask the co-founders of Black Lives Matter, they would say that they feel like we should be judged by our core identities or personalities. We agree with this and think that it's more of who we are as individuals on the inside than on the outside. When looking at an article about developing a leadership identity written by Covens, Owens, Lagerby, Manella, and Austin, they described the developmental influences in creating a leadership identity. They stated that as children we model the behavior that is being shown to us. Therefore, if positive leadership is being exemplified and creating an uplifting environment, we are more likely to act in this way. However, if as children we see negative leadership behavior where the adult figure doesn't care and is putting negative connotation on the minority, we are more likely to think in this way. The article connects to Black Lives Matter in that the founders believe that it is very important in the Black community. There is a tremendous value in others having individual identities, and that these differences provide a broader range of perspective. If we have tolerance for identity differences and use them as an asset, as leaders we will find the entire group or community can flourish. The leadership approach for the Black Lives Matter movement has parallels to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in efforts to end racial segregation in the 1960s. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was a prolific speaker that used the tools of the day to spread his vision and create awareness. An example of this is the timing of the MLK's epic I Have a Dream speech, which was strategically delivered during a walk in Washington where hundreds of thousands of people were in attendance. This caught media attention, which in turn raised cultural awareness and aligned an unheard amount of followers. Similarly, the hashtag Black Lives Matter movement leveraged social media's ability to provide information and connect millions almost instantaneously. History repeats itself. The Black Lives Matter movement uses specific events to re-educate, share the vision, and raise awareness. This approach has capulated hashtag Black Lives Matter into mainstream dialogue. Through the use of cultural competence and inclusion, both the movements have been successful in empowering the masses. Martin Luther King Jr. has been gone for 50 years, and his message still resonates. 50 years later from now, I can only hope that hashtag Black Lives Matter will have left a lasting legacy. The vision for hashtag Black Lives Matter is fundamentally the same as it was for Martin Luther King Jr. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold truth to be evident that all men are created equal. The struggle for racial and gender equality is far from over, but we first must believe in the vision, create awareness, and empower the masses.
The Black Lives Matter architects and leaders display a strong use of communication, understanding of oppression and privilege, and ethical leadership. All of these perspectives of leadership that the Black Lives Matter leaders hold connects with concepts that we have learned in this course. Since the movement has extensive leadership, it helps to create an environment where group work is crucial to the success of the organization and promotes not only multicultural ways of teamwork, but a cross-functional way as well. This movement is a great example of when situational leadership would be very effective due to the ideological and political changes within the United States, as well as the cultural differences within the communities that the members deal with when working with the non-members or supporters of Black Lives Matter.